Right, before we get into this piece about Andrew, he's no prince, but if we're going to use the word prince of darkness, yes, prince of the devils of this world, would sum up Andrew. But before we get to that, what the hell is going on? That we are now faced with an overabundance of children. Where are the men and the women? The cries keep going up. I don't like him. He said it. I don't like his opinion. I don't like him. Mr. Officer. I actually saw a man. I followed him. I was out once protesting against a piece of fake news. And this man didn't like it. I went up to this officer. This fellow was about, what? He's in his 40s. And he's crying to this officer, and this officer's just ignoring him. And I went up and said, do you want a nappy? Do you want a tissue? What do you want? Why are you crying to this officer? Aren't you debating me? Officer, he's been saying things. What the dickens is going on? And I see it all around. Why don't you debate with us? Because you can't, you're children. And then you say, well, why are you speaking down to us? Hang on a minute. I'm not speaking down to you. But you're telling me you're children. Because you're expressing your position that you're down. You shouldn't be. You should be across. You should be mature, as we are mature. We thought we were talking to mature persons, but now you're telling us that you're children. You're down here. Why are you talking down to us? You don't even see that you're confessing to your own position, that you're children in an adult world. And of course, being children, as children are, you believe yourselves to be adults. But when a real adult comes along, you get offended. You get offended. But I'm staggered. I come from a world that has never known this before. I was brought up in a world where men were men and women were women. Really structured. I'm not talking about diversities. I'm talking about when men were men and women were women. In other words, what was right, and what was wrong was wrong. Just after the war. And of course, there were hard times. And so, yes, right was right and wrong was wrong. And if you're a thief, you're a thief, and so on and so forth. Everything was very plain. And nobody got big and offended. Oh, Mrs. Miggins, you know, I see such and such. Oh, that's none of that business. Weak minds, little children. Terrible today. It's horrendous. Horrendous. No wonder government can preach from its ministerial pulpit in Parliament that there's a plague, or pandemic as they call it, but not believe it themselves. And the generality of the population believe it. Governments, they're not locked down, And what members of the public shout out, hang on a minute, you're supposed to be locked down, Mr. Parliament. You're supposed to have masks. You're supposed to observe social distancing. You're not supposed to be congregating together. Who's doing that? Who's shouting that? Certainly not the freaking media. It's just a terrible day, isn't it? But let's get on to this. I've just whinged enough, haven't I? Let's have a look at this.
What's your reaction to Prince Andrew's statement on this? He says he's bewildered at the suggestion he hasn't been cooperating with the US authorities.
His bewilderment is subsidiary to my bewilderment because he's been personally invited to provide all the information he knows for more than a decade. I know personally, for over a decade, we've been asking him to come and provide all of the information that he has. I think I've personally invited him at least 3 times to tell us what he knows, and he just flat out refuses. I mean, as much as he keeps putting out these statements that he's bewildered and he doesn't understand or whatever, it's not faring very well for him. He clearly has information. He stayed at Mr. Epstein's various residences for a period of time. He met a lot of people who are now making it very well known that they were also victims. He's been a longtime friend of Ghislaine Maxwell. He was a very close friend of Jeffrey Epstein. He clearly made observations, heard things, saw things, and engaged in enough with people to where if you have nothing to hide or if you know information, come share it. If you don't, it certainly makes you look a certain way, and that way is not good.
You think he's deliberately, evading authorities?
There's no doubt that he's deliberately evading authorities. I mean, how much more clear? When have you ever heard a U.S. Attorney's Office at a press conference say, we are inviting you to come over, and he's not on a plane right now coming over? There's no doubt that they want to talk to him. There's no doubt that we have wanted to talk to him, and there's also no doubt that he hasn't spoken with anybody. So this is not helpful for him unless he immediately comes over and shares all of the information he has. I just don't see how he has any credibility left on this particular subject.
This is just to cover Sky News that they put this out. A source close to the Duke's legal working group said the Duke of York has offered his assistance to the investigation on a number of occasions this year. No, he hasn't. In addition, the working group have proactively contacted the DOJ twice in the last month and have received no response. That would be a lie. Because nothing that ever comes out from this lot, from our own establishment, is ever the truth. I think there's a second part to this. There we are. This is why we remain utterly bewildered. Why did you just post? Just let's face it. Let's be down to earth. Let's go back, okay, to times when things were plain and straightforward. If you were charged or said to have been involved in child molestation or child buggery, or anything, that you've stolen a lollipop, you'd stand on the house roof, you'd be on the housetop, shouting your innocence, rebutting the charges, strongly rebutting them, wanting to see the people face to face, to challenge them face to face. How dare you say I've done this? How dare you? Does Andrew? Oh. Where there is omission to defend oneself, there comes into play commission. Any honest, decent, upright person that refuses to defend themselves is saying that they have committed what is alleged against them, and that is natural law and common law. That's the stance. If you don't deny it, if you don't defend yourself, you don't rebuke the charges, you are saying, in effect, you did them. Doesn't matter what the lefties say. Blow them. You did it. An innocent person like you and I and anybody else would stand up and we'd be horrified. Absolutely horrified. Is Andrew? Is Andrew getting on a plane? Is Andrew responding? No, he's got a team of liars, as much as himself, to defend him. But because he's part of the so-called royalty, he can't be deported. Oh, I'd love him to see him deported. But the whole household, Madge herself, that queen, is involved. Her husband, who is now passed on, has been involved. I noticed they'd taken off one of the crests off the palace gates to signify that the old food eater, Philip, is dead. He's been dead for past 5 years, is it? And all the government can say and the media can say is, oh, he's in retirement. Hey? Every excuse under the sun is being applied to that frigging man, you know. You know, when he went to the cenotaph, the Remembrance Day, for the fallen of both wars that were created by the British government, mind you, he never appeared. So the excuse was he was ill. Just happens to be ill. And he just happens to have disappeared in that so-called crash where the Kia took out a 5-ton armour-plated, bulletproof, bomb-proof vehicle, tossed it across the road, looks like a cabbage, a Kia. And he wasn't even seen in that. and the eyewitness, love the eyewitness who said, oh yeah, I took him out backwards. So was he driving then with his arse on the steering wheel to take him out backwards? Can you imagine it? He's taking him out backwards, you see, through the windscreen. Do you ever drive that way? Eh? Your arse against the steering wheel, then say you hit a tree or something, and somebody comes along, whoa, I'll help you out. So you've been helped out backwards. So oh man, it is crazy. Crazy. But Andrew, yeah, I mean, Andrew and the rest of them, associating with people that we would love to see strung up on lampposts. Love to see them strung up. And these people, these Andrews, these Phillips, the Madge, or Queen if you like to call her, and the rest of them, they associate with the Savills and even knights, so many of them. And children falling from windows out of palaces, out of Buckingham Palace, and found dead in the fountains in Buckingham Palace. And the Queen herself, Madge, if you want to call her the Queen, I call her Madge. Blanche, everything under the sun. In 1964, kidnapped 14 Canadian children. Never seen them again. Never seen them again. It's a vile, wicked monarchy, which is also reflected in the wickedness of Parliament and their childbuggery. But Andrew has an awful lot to answer for, and I'll say this in the last part. I don't know anything about Trump, except he's not bent politics. I can see that from starters. But the one thing I equally notice that he, above every other president that has ever been of the United States, has begun to deal with the child buggery and the child trafficking that has been going on and continues to go on under various administrations up until his administration, and he's sorting it out. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't outed in the way that Trump outed him. At least he's dealing with the rottenness that is in government, and the media doesn't like it, and government doesn't like it. So they're calling him every name under the sun and giving him every piece of vilification that they can. Trump is doing this, Trump is doing that, Trump. If you believe the media, sad. If you believe governments, sad. They're all playing us. They're all playing us. We should sit back and just see the wickedness, utter wickedness of the media and governments. How they seek to play us, and sadly tens of thousands of continue to be played by government. We should have a life of our own, shouldn't we? We should say, well, you, Mr. Government, is there. You, Mr. Media, is there. Prove what you are saying, because you don't govern us. We're independent people. We own ourselves. You, government, don't own us. You don't own us, Mr. Media. You are not going to inform us what we should believe. We're going to examine what you are saying. And if it doesn't come up to scratch, then we're going to reject what you're saying, and we're going to speak out against what you're saying. You're not ruling us. Who are they? Who are they? The royal family are about as royal as Satan himself is. They are the excrement of Satan. The dirt under the fingernails of Satan. The wax in the ears of Satan. The runny nose of Satan. They are Satan. They're satanic. I'll leave it at that.